Hey, ninth graders. So I am going to go over books 9 and 10, and then I'll do 11 and 12 tomorrow. But I gave you a PDF that I think will be like really, really easy so that you guys can read through it so that you can kind of see the exploits of Odysseus. This is like his road of trials during his hero's journey. So I'm going to go through kind of the basics that happen. I'm going to use the original text, but if you guys want to like look it up or if you want to use the PDF, that's fine too. It does not matter. But I'm going to use the original text so I can read you guys some lines. So it starts on book 9, which is called Newcos and Poseidon's Son. As you know, Odysseus is trapped on Calypso's island, and this is in media res because the book starts in the middle of things. So Odysseus is telling his story to Nausicaa and her parents, which are a king and queen of an island that he's washed up on after he escapes Calypso. So he's just recounting his story of like what he's been through to Nausicaa and her family. Also, I'm sorry that this is what I look like. I am still in my pajamas, and I also got my dolls today. That's kind of where I'm at. So let's get into it. So book 9, we start talking about his situation with Poseidon's son. As you know, Poseidon is pissed because Odysseus poked the eye out of one of Poseidon's sons. And if you guys are familiar with the lore, it's okay if you're not, but if you're familiar, Poseidon has a bunch of sons that are Cyclops, and there are some other, not like the Titans, but it's like it's a different situation. But Odysseus begins his story. He says, I am Odysseus, I'm the son of Laertes, and he tells his story. And he starts out, I have everything labeled here. He starts out and he's in the belly of the whale. So he talks about how he gets shipwrecked by Zeus and Poseidon. So he gets shipwrecked and he ends up in the belly of the whale, which is kind of where he's trapped in this trial world where he has to escape. Because when you're in the belly of the whale, it's kind of like when you're trapped in the new world. Which the new world for him is the sea, so he's trapped at sea. He says, now Zeus, the lord of cloud, roused in the north a storm against the ships, and driving veils of squall, moved down like night on land and sea. So he was shipwrecked. So that's what happened with Odysseus. He was shipwrecked, and that's kind of when he was in the belly of the whale. And then he begins his trials. So he was taken out to sea, and then he starts drifting. The first trial is the first trial that you guys will put on your tracking sheet is that he meets the Lotus Eaters. The Lotus Eaters are actually a really common that you see in modern literature. So the Lotus Eaters who live upon that flower. We landed there to take on water. All ships' companies mustered alongside for the midday meal. So they landed here and they took a break. They offered the sweet lotus to their friends, but those who ate this honeyed plant, the lotus, never cared to report nor to return. They longed to stay forever, browsing on that native bloom, forgetful of their homeland. So the curse of the lotus is that it makes you completely forget about your home and you stay there and you eat the lotus forever. One thing in modern literature that the lotus is... Hi, baby. One thing that the lotus is taken from is in the Wizard of Oz. If you guys are familiar, in the musical or the play version, they have the woodland flowers that make them dance around. And then in the movie, they have the field of flowers that makes them all fall asleep and they lose motivation. So this is like a very common trope is the lotus, where it makes people forget their motivations and they kind of have to stay there forever and kind of forget what their goal was. So he first encounters the Lotus Eaters. He does lose a few people. He says, I drove them, all 3 whaling, to the ships, tied them down under their rowing benches and called the rest. So there were 3 men who did eat the lotus, and he basically dragged them on the boat and tied them down and was like, we're leaving. The next part that we have we meet the Cyclops. As you know, Odysseus pokes his eye out. The story's hilarious though. So we meet the Cyclops, which is one of Poseidon's sons. Odysseus did not know this at the time. I feel like he should have, but he did not. So we have the Cyclops, and the Cyclops eats people. So spoiler alert. So he meets the Cyclops. They eat people. He is noticing that the Cyclops is eating his men, and he's eating goats as well. So he's eating like goats and sheep on the island, and he's also starting to eat his men. So Odysseus has to go in and try to defeat him so that they can get back onto their ship and leave because they're kind of eating everybody. He describes the natives as wild savages and lawless or unhospitable and God-fearing men. So he is not super happy with what's going on. So they see that there is a like cavern that he lives in. So he sees the Cyclops like lives in this cavern. And once he kidnaps all the men and puts them into the cavern, they have to try to escape somehow. So what they do is they put the skins of sheep on top of themselves so that he thinks they're sheep, and then they like run away. It's a much more like long-winded situation than that, but they put sheep on top of themselves so that they can run away. And then Odysseus starts to try to talk to him. He says, "Who are you? Where are you from? What brings you here?" And then they start to talk about who they served under, because like they were from Troy. They try to talk to him. And then the Cyclops says, "We Cyclops care not for the whistle for your thundering Zeus." They're like, "We don't care what Zeus says." And then Odysseus talks about how Lord Poseidon has knocked him off course. And then the Cyclops says, "Then he dismembered them and made his meal, gaping and crunching with mountain lion everything, innards, flesh, and marrow bones." So he starts eating people, which is great. And then they have a big boulder that is blocking the door so that they can't escape. I forgot. They get the Cyclops drunk. How could I forget? Here's liquor to wash down your scraps of men. How could I forget? So the Cyclops is drunk, and then Odysseus covers himself in the sheepskin, and he escapes. And then Cyclops is like, "Where are you? Where are you? Who are you?" And then, joke of the century, Odysseus says, "My name is Nobody." He says, "My name is Nobody," which is funny because then when he's calling for help, he says, "Nobody's tricked me. Nobody's ruined me." And it's like, but it's, get it? Because his name's Nobody. So when the Cyclops says, "Nobody's tricked me," everyone's like, okay. But yeah, and then we see him poking his eye out. So here he says, when he is poking his eye out, he says, "So with our brand, we bored that great eye socket while blood ran out from the red hot bar." So it was one of the bars on the fire, and they poked his eye out. Eyelid and lash were seared, the piercing ball hissing broiled, and the roots popped. Blah. So they poke his eye out, and then his name is Polyphemus. And they say, "Polyphemus, what ails you?" And he says, "Nobody's ruined me, nobody's ruined me." And it's like, ha ha ha. So it's a pun. Yeah, and then it says, "Ah, well, if nobody has played you a fool there in your lonely bed, then we have no need to blah, blah, blah." Because he's trying to pray to his father, and they're like, "Well, if nobody's hit you, then it's fine." So it's funny. It's a joke. But yeah. And then there is a little bit of hubris here when Odysseus tries to be like super clever. So there is a little bit of hubris. He keeps trying to talk, and he is kind of stalling, and the men are kind of making fun of him. So the blind thing in his doubled fury broke a hilltop in his hands and heaved it after us. So because Odysseus is like being a little bit egotistical, the Cyclops does have the opportunity to try to fight back. So him and the Cyclops is a whole thing. And then he tries to pray to Poseidon. And he says, "Will you please help me because I am blind?" And in those words, the god heard him. So when Polyphemus prays to Poseidon, that's when Poseidon gets pissed. And then Odysseus gets knocked off shore. So book 9 is all about him poking out. It's done now, but it's all about him poking the eye of the Cyclops, which is the son of Poseidon. And then when the Cyclops prays to Poseidon, Poseidon gets mad. So he kind of ruins everything for Odysseus. Book 10 is called The Grace of the Witch. The witch in question is named Circe, but we will get there. So they made their landfall on Aeolia Island, which has the Wind King. The Wind King, dear to the gods, who never dies. So this one has the Wind King. This guy can bottle storms. So if you guys are familiar with the SpongeBob movie, If you're familiar with the SpongeBob movie, which you might not be, but if you're familiar with the SpongeBob movie, when they are, because the SpongeBob movie is all a hero's journey. When they're going to Shell City, it's a whole thing, so it's a hero's journey. But if you remember, they have the bag of winds and that Zeus gives them, and then they let it go and they like ruin it for everybody, and then David Hasselhoff saves them. But the bag of winds is a very popular trope. In the bag of winds, if you let it go, it will propel you to wherever you are trying to go, and it will get you to your destination. So he reaches the king of winds and he gives them a bag of winds. Spoiler alert, Odysseus' stupid men mess it up. So the bag of winds is released because they're dumb. So it says, "We're in that bag bestowed on me by Aeolus' great heart, and one would glance at his benchmate and say, it never fails, he's welcome anywhere. So temptations had its way with my companions, and they untied the bag." So they don't realize what's in it, and they don't really realize what it does, but it's a bag of wind. So when they untie the bag, the wind roars like a hurricane, and then it blows them like the total wrong direction. So they, his stupid men, let the wind out, and it completely blows them like all the way the wrong direction, like all the way back to the island. So they literally use the winds, and then they go back to the King of Winds island, and he's like, "Why are you here?" And he's like, "Didn't my bag of winds launch you home?" And Odysseus is like, "So my men kind of messed it up." And so the king says, "Take yourself out of this island. No law, no wisdom lays on it now to help a man the blessed gods to test." So Aeolus is like, "Do not talk to me. The gods clearly hate you, and also you're an idiot. So leave." So Odysseus is like, okay. So Odysseus has to go because his men messed it up and they opened the bag. So you can see that when we talk about the traits that you're supposed to learn from stories like this, we're learning about traits that you shouldn't have, kind of like a Pandora's box situation. The men get too curious and they open the bag of winds, which they are not supposed to do, which harms their journey on the way home. So you can see that it's kind of teaching those skills about like you know, how they say like, you know, curiosity killed the cat. It's like a very old idea that you should not let curiosity and mischief overcome, you know, whatever journey that you're on. So it's super common. It's like a Pandora's box situation. So it's just another thing where it's like teaching you what to do. You know, for the lotus flower, it was like you have to remain motivated, you can't give up. For the Cyclops, for Odysseus, it was kind of like you can't be super egotistical, because Poseidon eventually found out that he poked his eye out, and then Poseidon knocked him off course. And here Odysseus' men let mischief overcome them and curiosity, so they were kind of in trouble there. So each trial is just unveiling different things that you should avoid. So it's just showing you like the traits that of a hero that you do not want to have. So it's basically just like a bunch of blunders of like Odysseus and his men like totally messing everything up. So we're still in the middle of book 10. Then they land. I remember when I was reading this, I was like, what? So the next island they land on has cannibals. Good. So the next island they land on is cannibals. It says, "But she for greeting called from the meeting ground her lord and master, Antiphatus." So Antiphatus comes in, who came to drink their blood. He seized one man and tore him on the spot, making a meal of him. The other two leaped out of doors and ran to join the ship. So they're trying to like be like, hey, like we need help. And they go and find cannibals, and one man is ripped apart and eaten right in front of them. And they're like, we're gonna go. So this would be a fourth one. So we have the cannibals who eat them. So the order we have so far are Lotus Eaters, Cyclops, Bag of Winds, and then we have the cannibals. Number 5 is Circe, which is a super famous witch. So Circe's witch, it says, "On our next landfall was Iaea, island of Circe, dire beauty and divine, sister of baleful Aeetes, like him and fathered by Helios, the light of morals, on Perse, child of ocean streams." So Circe is like a super beautiful maiden, and she is a witch. So they're on the island, and they're asking them for help. They can see a wisp of smoke from Circe, so they know that she is there. So they try to ask her for help. Circe spoiler alert, does not exactly help them the way they want them to. The hall of Circe and wolves and mountain lions lay there, and mild in her soft spell fed on her drug of evil. So she fed on her drug of evil. It says none would attack. Oh, it was strange. And switching their long tails, they faced our men like hounds. So she's surrounded by all of these wild creatures who are not attacking her, and she's surrounded by them. And then the goddess ends up turning all of Odysseus's men into pigs. Good. So she turns everyone into animals. So it says here, she turns them all into pigs, and she says to make them lose desire or thought of our dear fatherland. So as you can see, the goal of Odysseus is to return home, but several of the trials he's on is trying to make him forget about this goal. So you have the Lotus Eaters where they lose motivation for their homeland, and then when they are turned into pigs, they lose all of the thought of the dear motherland. It says fodder for hogs who rut in slumber on the earth. So she turns them all into pigs, and then Odysseus is like, can we do anything? Like, can I fix this? So Odysseus gives a prayer, and he's met by Hermes, who is going to also help him escape Calypso's island when he gets there. But Hermes the messenger brings down, it says, if you go to set them free, you go to stay, and never more make sail from your home. So he says if you try to go talk to her, she will curse you as well. So Hermes gives him a drug that will let him take with her the Barrow's amulet. So he gives him like an amulet so that he won't be affected by Circe's magic. So that way he can go in and be like, hey. So it's a magic plant, black root, blah, blah, blah. So he eats this plant. It's not an amulet, sorry, it's a plant. And then he goes in and tries to talk to her. He says, Circe, am I a boy that you should make me soft and doting now? Here in this house you turned my men to swine. Now it is myself you hold, enticing into your chamber, to your dangerous bed, to take my manhood when you have me stripped. Interesting. So Circe is trying to have sex with Odysseus. Shocker. I feel like Odysseus, all these women, Nausicaa, who's the princess, tried to have sex with him. Calypso tried to have sex with him. And now we have Circe, who's trying to have sex with him. So I guess, I don't know. It says, or swear me first a great oath. If I do, you'll work no more enchantment to my harm. So Odysseus trades his body for the release of his men. Wow, what a trooper. It says, I entered Circe's flawless bed of love. So, classic Odysseus, am I right, folks? So he trades having sex with her, and she is supposed to release all of the men so that they are no longer pigs. Once they are released, it says, but Circe already turned away. Her long staff in hand, she left the hall and opened up the sty. I saw her enter, driving those men turned swine to stand before me. She stroked them, each in turn, with some new chrism. And then, behold, their bristles fell away. The coarse pelt grown upon them by her drug melted away, and they were men again. Their eyes upon me, each one took my hands, and great regret and longing pierced them through, so the room rang in sobs, and even Circe pitied the transformation. So here it kind of looks like the men are missing being pigs, but it's probably because she cursed them to kind of forget their homeland, so now that they have to deal with the strife of being humans, I think that's kind of what I think, but it's up to your interpretation. So anyway, they finally escape. And it looks like after they escape, it says, then turn back as commanded to his work, and only one lags behind. Oh yeah, there was one man who was drunk on the roof, and he fell off and died. I forgot about that. He fell off and died, and apparently they were on Circe's island for like a year, which I cannot imagine. It says, Captain, shake off this trance and think of home, if home indeed awaits us. So everyone's kind of like, we need to leave. So they're talking to Circe. And the next thing that they have to do, because they ask her, like, hey, we really need to get home, but we're kind of running into obstacles everywhere we go. And since she is a witch, they ask her, like, what should we do so that we can get home and like take care of what's wrong. So here is what Circe tells them they need to do, because book 10 is almost over. So she says, son of Laertes and the gods of old, Odysseus, master, mariner, and soldier, you shall not stay here longer against your will, but home you may not go unless you take a strange way around and come to the cold homes of death and pale Persephone. So he is going to go to the underworld, is what she's saying. She's like, you have to go to the underworld. You shall hear prophecy from the rapt shade of blind Tiresias of Thebes, forever charged with reason even among the dead. To him alone, of all the flitting ghosts, Persephone has given a mind undarkened. So he has to go to the underworld, which is pretty dope. So that's in the next book. It's pretty cool. And then, of course, Odysseus says, no man has ever sailed to the land of death. And the goddess replies, son of Laertes and the gods of old, Odysseus, master blah blah, feel no dismay because you lack a pilot. Only set up your mast and haul your canvas to the fresh blowing north. Sit down and steer and hold that wind even to the bourne of the ocean, Persephone's deserted stand and grove. So they are going to go to this particular location, and they have to sacrifice something. They have to sacrifice, I think it's a sheep. It says an ewe, and I can't remember what that is, EWE. But anyway, they have to, a black ram. There we go. Thank you. So they have to sacrifice a black ram, and they have to be in this particular location. And then you shall see now the souls buried of the dead of the shadowy host. So once they do like these things, they will be in the valley of the dead. So that is going to be unfortunate. So he has to go to the underworld, and you can see that is the title of book 11, A Gathering of Shades. And shades are usually what they would call, not ghosts, but the spirits who are like locked in the underworld. So book 11 and 12 are the next ones that I'm going to talk to you guys about. So he has to go to the underworld, and then the title for book 12, let me see, is Sea Perils and Defeat. So then he has to go through some stuff when he's sailing on the ocean once he finally figures out his way home. So yeah, Odysseus is not doing super hot right now. We've got 5 trials he's been through. We've got the Lotus Eaters, which kind of represents that lack of motivation and kind of giving up on the journey. We have the Cyclops, which represent, the hubris of self-importance, of cockiness, and then we've got the Bag of Winds, which represents, like curiosity and mischief, which kind of messes them up. And then we've got the Cannibals, which don't know what we're supposed to learn from that. And then we have Circe, who's the witch, and she is also kind of like that temptation, the forgetting of what is going on around you and kind of forgetting about your journey. And then we've got the Shades, which are the ghosts, the spirits, and he'll encounter like people who have passed on. So Odysseus kind of has to go through that. He encounters his mother, who is dead. That's kind of a big learning experience for him. And then eventually they will set out to sea, and they have to deal with like a big sea monster, and it's a whole thing. So I know that was a lot. It was only 2 of the books. I will go over the other 2 tomorrow. Again, please read the PDF. I think it will make everything make sense. It's a really good summary of what happens to Odysseus after he tries to leave Troy. And then when he gets to Calypso's island, all the stuff in the middle. So please read the PDF. I think it'll be really helpful. You guys will see me again tomorrow. I will upload another video. I hope this helped. It may have been more confusing, but you're doing great. Next week, is our last week of content. So we'll just go over a couple more things for the journey of Odysseus next week, and then we'll be done. So just hang in there. You're almost finished. And I guess that's it. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. See ya.